Welcome to Stories of HFY, your ultimate destination for thrills, adventure, and entertainment. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell to join us on this epic journey. Let's create unforgettable moments together. The celebration had started like any other birthday party. Laughter echoing through the suburban backyard, children bouncing wildly inside the inflatable castle, the air thick with the sugary scent of cake and cotton candy. Parents lounged under the shade of a large oak tree, sipping lemonade, while the birthday boy Jason ran around with his friends, their faces painted like superheroes and princesses. It was a perfect afternoon, filled with joy, the kind of memory that would last forever. And then the sky split open. It began as a ripple, a distortion high above, as though the fabric of reality itself had been disturbed. The swirling vortex formed in the blue expanse, dark tendrils of cosmic energy spiraling outward, warping the clouds into unnatural patterns. Gasps of awe and confusion filled the backyard as party guests turned their eyes upward, shielding themselves from the glare of an impossible light. Then it emerged. A colossal spacecraft, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, descended from the vortex. Its sleek, metallic body shimmered with iridescent blues and blacks, its tentacle-like appendages stretching out, flexing as though tasting the very air. The ship pulsated with an eerie glow, casting long, shifting shadows across the ground. At first there was stunned silence. Then the screaming began. Parents rushed to grab their children, dragging them away from the bounce house, knocking over tables covered in birthday treats. Jason's mother, Emily, clutched her son to her chest, her heartbeat racing in tandem with the terrified shrieks surrounding her. Some guests fumbled for their phones, frantically trying to capture the spectacle or call for help. But there was no signal, no response. Only the deep, resonant hum of the ship as it loomed over them. And then the beams descended. Pillars of soft blue light shot from the ship's underbelly, bathing the entire backyard in an otherworldly glow. Jason, wide-eyed, reached toward it, mesmerized, but Emily yanked him back. The air felt thick with energy, a vibration that seemed to resonate within their very bones. Something was coming. The ship's appendages curled downward, extending toward the ground, and a low mechanical voice boomed from within. Not spoken words but thoughts, clear, deliberate, echoing in their minds. "We have found you," Jason whimpered. Emily tightened her grip. The guests stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. Were they here for war? For study? For something worse? The beams flickered. Shapes materialized within them, tall, slender figures emerging from the light, their forms humanoid but elongated, their eyes glowing pools of silver. Their presence was neither hostile nor welcoming. They simply were. And then the tallest one stepped forward. It surveyed the chaos with something akin to curiosity before its gaze landed on Jason. The boy, to his mother's horror, took a hesitant step forward, as if drawn by an invisible force. The being extended a hand. A hush fell over the backyard. No one dared move. Jason tilted his head, then without fear reached out to touch the alien's fingers. The moment their skin met, a flood of images crashed into his mind. Visions of stars being born, of ancient civilizations crumbling, of endless journeys through galaxies beyond human understanding. He saw them as they saw him. And then he understood. They were not invaders. They were seekers. The alien lowered its hand and turned its gaze toward the rest of the humans. "The child knows." Emily yanked Jason back once more, her voice finally finding its strength. "Knows what?" The alien blinked, tilting its head in a manner eerily human. "He is one of you." The words struck like a thunderclap. Whispers erupted among the guests. Emily shook her head in disbelief. "No," she stammered. "He's just a boy. He's my son." He was never just human. The ship above them pulsed as if in agreement, and Jason's fingers twitched. His eyes shimmered, not blue, not green, but silver, reflecting the same glow as the visitors before them. Panic surged through Emily's chest. She held onto him tighter. "You can't take him." The alien took a slow step forward, the weight of its presence pressing against the space between them. "He will decide." Silence fell once more. Jason looked up at his mother, then at the being before him. Something inside him called, a whisper buried in his very existence, an answer to a question he had never asked. He knew he didn't belong here. But he also knew he wasn't ready to leave. Jason turned back to the alien and, with the innocent defiance only a child could have, shook his head. Not yet. The being stared at him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, it nodded. The ship hummed once more, the light retracting, the tendrils curling back into place. The being stepped backward, dissolving into the blue glow, their forms fading like mist. Then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the ship ascended, up into the swirling vortex, disappearing into the fabric of the universe. And then the sky was normal again. The guests stood there, stunned, unable to process what had just transpired. The party decorations fluttered in the wind. The bounce house, still inflated, seemed absurdly out of place. Emily knelt in front of Jason, her hands trembling as she held his face. "What just happened?" she whispered. Jason didn't answer. He simply looked up at the sky, his silver eyes reflecting the vastness of space. Days passed, but the events of that afternoon lingered in Emily's mind like a shadow, never quite leaving her, never quite fading into the normalcy she longed for. Jason had returned to his usual routine, school, playdates, meals, but there was an odd stillness about him, a quiet weight that hung over him as though he were aware of something no one else could see. He would sit in his room for hours, staring at the stars outside his window, his silver eyes reflecting the vast, infinite expanse. His friends had started to notice something was different too. The other children no longer invited him to play as freely, their curiosity replaced by fear, as if they had sensed the change in him before he himself had fully grasped it. Emily tried to keep things normal, taking him to the park, making his favorite meals, hoping that somehow she could anchor him to the life he had known before the ship's arrival. But the distance between them grew with each passing day. The whispers of what happened at the party never fully went away, even if no one dared to speak them aloud. The incident was a secret carried in the eyes of the people who had witnessed it, buried beneath layers of confusion and disbelief. Then one night Jason disappeared. Emily had been downstairs, catching up on laundry, when she realized the house had grown eerily quiet. She called out his name, expecting to hear the familiar shuffle of his feet or his soft giggle, but there was nothing. Panic flooded her chest as she rushed upstairs, only to find his room empty. His bed was untouched, his shoes gone, his jacket missing. Frantically, she searched the house, her mind racing with possibilities. Had he run away? Had the visitors come for him again? Was this the moment they had warned her about, the moment he would decide to leave? Her breath caught when she stepped outside and saw him standing in the backyard, gazing up at the sky. The soft hum of the night air seemed to carry a tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Jason stood there, motionless, his eyes glowing with the same silver light that had consumed him that day. "Jason," Emily called out, her voice trembling. "Jason, please, come back inside." He didn't respond. Instead, he slowly turned toward her, his gaze filled with something ancient and profound. He wasn't the same boy she had once known. There was something more in him now, something that transcended the limits of this world. A soft wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree. Jason stepped forward, his movements deliberate as if guided by some invisible force. He didn't speak, but his presence was overwhelming, and Emily could feel the change in the air around them. The world felt different, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted once more. Finally Jason spoke, his voice soft, almost distant. "They're calling me?" Emily's heart shattered at the words. "Who, Jason? Who's calling you?" His gaze drifted upward again, his face filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "They'll come for me, Mom. And when they do, I have to go." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she took a hesitant step forward. "No, Jason. I need you here. You're my son. I can't lose you." For the first time, Jason's eyes softened, his silver irises glinting with sorrow. "I'm not the same anymore. I'm not just human. I've never been just human." A chill ran down Emily's spine as the wind began to intensify, swirling around them both. In the distance she could feel something stirring, something vast, something ancient. And Jason, standing before her, seemed to be a part of it. His silver eyes gleamed with an understanding far beyond her own, a knowing that sent a wave of both awe and terror rushing through her. "I don't know if I'm ready," he whispered, the struggle clear in his voice. "But I have to go, Mom. It's what I am." The sky above them began to shimmer again just like it had that day. The vortex was opening once more, and the same pulsing iridescent glow filled the air. Emily reached out for him, her voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me." Jason's hand lingered in the air between them, trembling as if torn between two worlds. "I love you, Mom," he said, his voice steady now, yet filled with the weight of everything that had changed. And then, as the first tendrils of light began to stretch toward him, Jason took a final lingering look at his mother before stepping backward into the beam. Emily's heart shattered as the vortex closed behind him, the last flicker of his silver eyes vanishing into the stars. The sky returned to normal and the world felt unbearably still. In the silence that followed, Emily knew something had changed forever. Jason was gone, but he wasn't lost. He had gone to where he truly belonged, a place far beyond her reach. And for the first time, Emily realized that the journey Jason was on was not just his, it was something that had always been a part of him. He had never truly been just human. The days that followed felt like a blur. Emily couldn't bring herself to go back to Jason's room. She couldn't bear to look at the empty bed, the toys he had abandoned, the things he had left behind. It felt like a gaping hole had opened in the very fabric of her life, one that nothing could ever fill again. The world continued around her, but it was quieter now. Her friends, her neighbors, they all tried to comfort her, offering kind words and glances full of pity, but Emily knew they couldn't understand. How could they? No one had seen what she had seen, no one had felt the gravity of the moment when Jason stepped into the light. When he disappeared, he hadn't just left her. He had left everything they had known behind. It was as though reality itself had shifted, and the world they had once shared no longer existed in the same way. Emily went through the motions, of course. She returned to work, kept up with her chores, but every night, when the sky grew dark, she found herself staring out the window, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The strange hum in the air, the odd vibrations that seemed to linger after Jason's departure, still made her wonder if he would return. It was during one of these late-night vigils, as she gazed at the stars with a sense of quiet longing, that she felt the change again. The air grew heavy as though something were gathering, something far away yet close enough to feel. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she looked up to see a familiar flicker in the sky. The vortex. This time it was different. It wasn't as vast or as blinding as the first time, but it pulsed with the same undeniable energy. The sky twisted, and the faint outline of a ship began to materialize in the glowing rift. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed outside, a part of her still hoping, no praying, that Jason would come back. The ship descended slowly, its sleek form gliding down from the stars like an ancient, forgotten memory. The air around her vibrated with power, and she could feel the pull, that strange magnetism that had once drawn Jason into their presence. And then she saw them. The figures. The same slender beings she had seen before, but now their eyes shimmered with recognition, an understanding that wasn't there before. They hovered in the light, distant yet present, their forms almost ethereal, as though they existed in more than one space at once. And then a voice. It wasn't mechanical like before. This time the voice was softer, more familiar. It echoed in her mind, a gentle whisper, like a message from far beyond. "He is here." Her heart skipped. For a moment she thought she had imagined it, that perhaps her grief had made her mind play tricks. But the voice spoke again, clearer this time. "He remembers." The ship's presence seemed to expand, enveloping the backyard in its eerie glow. The air hummed with a quiet intensity, and Emily, in a daze, stepped forward, her feet moving of their own accord. She couldn't stop herself, couldn't pull away from the pull of something she didn't fully understand. And then, standing at the edge of the light, she saw him. Jason. He stood before her, his silver eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the ship, his expression serene. He was taller now, his features more defined, his presence somehow more complete. It was as though the child she had known had faded, replaced by something much older, wiser, and more powerful. But in his eyes she still saw traces of the boy he had once been. "Jason," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. You came back." He didn't answer at first. He just looked at her, his expression filled with a quiet sorrow. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "I never left, Mom." "Not really." Emily's heart ached at his words. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to pull him back into her world, but she knew deep down that he was no longer hers to keep. "They need me," he continued, his voice steady, though his eyes held a sadness she couldn't place. "I've always been one of them. I've always been meant to be with them." The air around them seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, Emily thought she saw a glimpse of the stars in his eyes, stars she had never seen before, far beyond the ones she had known. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was something else, something beyond human comprehension. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't want to lose you, Jason. I need you. Please don't leave me again." Jason's gaze softened, and he took a slow step forward, his silver eyes locking with hers. "I never wanted to leave you. But I can't stay. Not here. Not like this." The wind swirled around them as if carrying the weight of their unspoken words. Emily could feel the pull of the ship again, like a soft whisper in the back of her mind. She knew what he meant. He was being called, drawn into a destiny far greater than hers. The ship above them pulsed, and the light around them brightened, as though waiting for him to make his final decision. Jason reached out, touching her cheek one last time. His touch was warm, but it held an energy that felt like the beating of distant stars. "I'll always be with you, Mom. In the stars, in the places you can't see yet." With those final words, the light around him grew stronger, and Emily had no choice but to step back, watching as he turned and walked toward the ship. As he crossed into the light, she felt her heart shatter all over again, but this time, there was no resistance. She let him go. The ship hummed one final time, and in a burst of light, it disappeared back into the sky, taking Jason with it. And for the first time since that fateful day, Emily didn't feel alone. She looked up at the stars, knowing that Jason was out there, somewhere where he truly belonged.